Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Doctor Who in Review, presented by Diversely Geek, with Nisha M, your geek mom, here with us, and Man Bites Media with myself, Lewis, and our special guest, John Reed Adam from Narcotic Casserole.
Hello.
Hello. Awesome to have you on.
Right? And today we are going to be talking about the villains, antagonists.
Can we really call them? Can we really call them that? Because they didn't exactly go that familiar route this year, did they?
Enemies,
antagonists,
just horrible people,
oppositions. But here's the thing: sometimes
people.
They were horrible people. That was
they were just some.
Honestly, that was the thing that kind of made the season fascinating, was the fact that we had we had antagonists who weren't actually didn't have real ill intent.
That's true.
Exactly. They were morally ambiguous people,
or just morally ambiguous, or even just nature.
Yeah,
exactly.
So let's just go with antagonists,
opposition,
antagonists. Yeah. Let's leave it as a wide spectrum of anybody that was pretty much pushing the story against our heroes, which are obviously the companions of Doctor Who.
The ones who cause conflict. There we go. Yeah. Yes, we're going to climb the mountain of conflict.
That's right.
As Capaldi said, it's like a Nazi Julie Andrews. Sorry, Nisha, that little nod to a previous Capaldi performance.
Oh, gosh. Yeah. Always and forever, my friend. That's always and forever.
I'd say the best way to do it is just go by an episode basis.
Yeah, I definitely think that the best way to start off, let's start off with episode 1, The Woman Who Fell to Earth. And obviously the main antagonist of this one, and this is a clear-cut antagonist,
bona fide villain, is Tim Shaw.
That's a pure villain, right?
Tim
exactly.
Shaw and the Stenza.
Yeah. Basically, Doctor Who's answer to the Predator.
Yeah.
Dentist's worst nightmare.
Right? The first thing that I thought of was Little Shop of Horrors, and I was like, oh my God, the dentist. Yes. They turned him into a monster. This is fantastic.
Right?
Yeah, he had... I'll say the way the episode was... I'd say the big triumph of the season, consistently all the way through, was the production value and how good the show looked. Because I will say they framed a lot of their characters really well, particularly Tim Shaw, because when you see him come out of the Hershey Kiss of Death, he really looked very imposing. Yeah. So really good, really big applause to the production design on that one. But I think it also helped that he had a really imposing actor to embody it.
His voice, there was something about his voice. I don't know if they did something to it that made it sound very rough, very raspy, and this completely like distorted voice that you kind of get like this weird sense of dread throughout the episode every time that he spoke. And it was the same thing in the companions. You kind of see their emotions kind of scattered around, and it was very fascinating to see that in Doctor Who again.
Yeah. I remember all of us, we were all together when we saw that first episode. Yeah. And for me, I was like going, tonally, this is freaking me out, because it kind of was taking me back to the days of Philip Hinchcliffe, when they had these hardcore monsters who were pretty much serial killers, like the Brain of Morbius, Image of the Fendal, Talons of Wang Chiang, where they had these hardcore serial killer villains. And I was like, man, we haven't really had this in the new series. So it was nice.
Well, yeah, somewhat.
Not like this.
No, but definitely not like this.
Yeah, not like this. So it was one of those things that did put the season on a good foot with me with that first episode, and had me cautiously optimistic about the way it was going to go with Chibnall at the helm.
So how about you, Nisha? What'd you think in regards to Tim Shaw?
I like Tim Shaw. I love the character, and I like being able to have a villain who's very clear-cut villain, but at the same time, I like one who we can feel, like I said, ambiguous about, because we're not sure how to take them and how much of a villain they are. But for him, Tim Shaw, this character is clear-cut evil, to the point at which he is willing to thwart his own cultural and social mores in order to be able to win the leadership of the Stenza, right? and you realize that he's breaking all his own rules. And you're like, yeah, this is a pure villain.
Yeah.
There's a leadership element to it, just like the Daleks, and the Cybermen, and there is a level of the Borg collective mentality, but at the same time, right? But at the same time,
you're right. I was
yes,
quirkiness of him.
Yeah.
Except he had a lot more personality. Let's give him that.
He had more of a kind of stinger that he did, and yeah, I agree.
And I think the other angle,
plus they look cooler.
I think the other angle I gotta say I really dug is that for an imposing villain whose whole intention is to be a tribal leader, it was actually kind of cool, and it was actually very Doctor Who that in the end he was so petty.
Yeah,
and he was in the end, he as imposing as he was just a child. He was just a whinging little child who just wanted to be leader so bad, wanted to be king of the hill.
Which we get a lot of that in this season from the protagonist. It's interesting because there's a lot
from the antagonist. We have a lot of petulance. There's quite a bit of petulance. I think that it's a running theme. Here I am. See, there's my first one for the episode, Lewis. Got it in. I think that it's a running theme. The fact that our antagonist quite petulant, quite childish in terms of their action ability. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
It's not like they're all, acting in accordance with some other greater mentality. Like I said, referencing, the almost any other race in the past of Doctor Who. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
There was always a philosophy of all for one type of thing, and that's not what we got this season at all. Everyone was acting independently and in terms of what was best for them.
Yeah, agreed.
And it was, so there was no social herding per se. And it was interesting because we're not used to that. We're not used to getting those. We got them with the reboot when we came back. And we actually managed to get it here and again with McCoy, and we managed to get it here and again, scattered with the first 5 Doctors. But with Eccleston, we totally got that. We got a lot of one-offs. And then in the beginning seasons of 10, we also got the same thing, the Arachnids, for instance. It's a one-off, right?
Yeah.
And that's Donna. So I felt like it was a throwback to that. And I actually kind of dig that, I do. I like having someone that I really don't like, but at the same time, I like. I like both. Yeah.
It's going to be the bad guy. He is the clear-cut bad guy. We all hate him. Let's go on with the story. Let's move on.
Actually, another thing I actually like to point out, another really smart move of making him this very physically imposing villain. And it was a really smart move making him the debut villain of Jodie Whittaker because, of course, of the expectations levied against Jodie Whittaker. And, of course, a lot of the cynics who kept maintaining that, that a woman couldn't be the Doctor. I think it was important to have a villain that pretty much is a full-blown representation of toxic masculinity. It was actually kind of cool to have sort of an archetypal villain like that facing off against what was going to be a new, drastically different iteration of the Doctor, and to show how well she could take him on, and without any sort of, to be able to basically take
without any preparation. I said without any preparation per se, because she was still cooking.
Exactly. Yeah, the fact that she was able to think on her feet
and jump into it so quick.
Yeah, jump into it and be able to take him on, and pretty much read him the riot act, and take him down with no time flat. That was important. Because you could say that he was kind of the embodiment of all the internet cynicism about how people were like going, how could she take on like a big ass alien menace like that? And I was like, apparently she did a pretty damn good job.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that was a good representation, and it kind of leads into the next episode, the Ghost Monument, where we see the Epso character and Engstrom character as kind of the the main people that we see, and the episode character leading on with that same exact thing.
Yeah,
very machismo, very kind of that negative aspect that we saw on the internet prior to watching the season, and it was the continuation of Tim Shaw.
Yeah, and the fact that he was
and the fact that they were debating right at the beginning of the episode,
and the fact that these two were very, Epso and Angstrom were very. He was doing it for fortune and glory, hands down. He could probably eat the money. And then you got her, who actually is doing it for a legitimate reason, like actually an actual cause. It was cool to have those, and it was. I like the way it did resolve with those two. Now the real question of the Ghost Monument is, there's a lot of obstacles throughout. Well, some obstacles. I mean, a lot of robots, but they alluded to flesh-eating water, but
and the toilet paper of doom.
Yeah, what they call them, the Shade, I think.
I think it was called the Shade.
I don't remember. Correct us on the comment section if we got one. But I'd say honestly, to me, I'd say the main villain was Ilan, played by a classic movie villain, Art Malik, who most action fans would know him as the villain from True Lies.
Yes.
That was Salim Abu Aziz. Yeah, that was him. So,
wow. I didn't catch that.
You did not know that? Yeah.
No, I didn't catch that.
He was a standout to me in that movie. And not only that, he was also in The Living Daylights as well. But he was a respected actor for a good long while. So, but I actually kind of considered him the big bad of it just because of how cold he was and how...
I agree.
And how absolutely unfeeling he was towards their situation. I mean, because, you have these people who pop in out of the blue who have nothing to do with this. And he's just so coldly saying, like, no, I'm just going to leave you on this planet to die.
And how he completely ignores the doctor, too. Which that kind of... I like how that kind of sets the doctor off. And it kind of introduces us and builds the character of the doctor right there. So, I agree. Yeah, that probably is the biggest... the biggest person of this episode, and kind of pushes the whole story, honestly.
I mean, I'm
the big bad of the episode.
I admit I'm actually glad that this episode didn't really have anything like a constant villain presence, just opposition. Yeah. Because in the end, this is also us still getting used to our companion characters as companions.
And there's so many of them.
And this is them full-blown trial by fire. Yeah. And to boot, literally not being done in the traditional way where they just hop into the TARDIS and this is happening. No, this time they're actually they got accidentally dragged into outer space. And that's
stuck in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
Literally in the middle of nowhere.
In the middle of nowhere on a planet actually called Desolation. Yeah. So...
That's not foreboding.
Exactly. So it was kind of nice that Ghost Monument didn't have anything like a constant presence. So I will say... for as silly as it is to have killer bed sheets,
but it was actually pretty cool. I actually liked that.
I liked the final face-off with them in the field, in the acetylene fields.
People really gave that scene so much grief, and I was like, "Why? This is so brilliant."
I was looking at it, going, "It's atmospheric. Doctor Who. It's atmospheric. They have a really wicked voice, and they're peering into her mind, hinting at things which." May not have come to fruition in this season, but you always you do get the feeling that they're going to pay that off somewhere down the line. I'm hoping so. But that all comes down to Chibnall. But I can't. The problem is with the Ghost Monument.
You do know that in the Ghost Monument that the overarching villainous entity is still the Senza. So while you're looking at Art Malek as this multi-gazillionaire who is extremely cold and apathetic to the plight of these planets and the people of the planets, all he wants to do is to run his race. And you're looking at Epso sorry, I can't remember the other name. Angstrom. I don't know how I do that because I love Angstrom. In the long run, this particular episode has multiple layers of what we would consider to be antagonists, right? At the very top of the layer, or rather the bottom of the layer, is the Senza, because as we find out later on in life, it's the Senza who are performing those genocides. And in the long run, it's still Tim Shaw, as we much later find out. So so that wasn't embedded egg or Easter egg per se, but we don't find it out till much later. But we knew it was the Senza. But then you also have the people of that planet themselves who cause their own state of devastation.
Yep.
So without that greed and that state of anarchy where that planet have ever existed for them to even have to face what they face, for it to be the last in the trials. So, I'm looking at it in a much bigger picture, and how my brain thinks in a way. But, I'm looking at that particular episode has so many layers to it in terms of what we consider to be enemies or antagonists or villains or anything. You know what I'm saying? That's yeah. So and that's what's very interesting and why I think it's an extremely, extremely successful. Out of the whole season, it's probably one of the most successful episodes. One, because there's so much heart to it, and because there's so much heart and angst to it, the story arcs that talk about the devastation, we connect to them so strongly. You know what I mean?
Correct.
And so therefore, it creates a state of polar opposites. And that's what a good story does. It creates polar opposition within us, and then we find that villain or that antagonist, or even that story itself, even a situation or an environment itself can take the place of being something negative. It's like being on Skaro when right?
Yeah.
The Davros creates an environment of pure and absolute evil and devastation, and beyond devastation. It's just horrible.
And I think when you're talking about that environment of desolation and horror, I think that's a good lead into Rosa, and that episode is the reason I question whether we should call this Villains or anything like that, because this is literally an idea that we're fighting against in this episode.
And Cresco was kind of indicative of the very thing we're fighting against. Now, he is a controversial villain because everyone pulls the same thing they pull on Marvel villains, which drive me crazy, when they say, like, there's nothing to him. I'm like going, the Doctor pretty much gave you everything. There's that brilliant scene where she stares him down and even taunts him, knowing that he can't hurt her. Mm-hmm. All you really need, you can pretty much guess just from context clues, the fact that this guy was in prison and he's very obviously doing this to prevent the civil rights movement, which basically means he comes from a long line of racist families. In all likelihood, I bet he was probably like some aristocrat.
Oh yeah.
He was probably from I'm wagering, rich family who made an entire career out of discrimination and probably downtrodden, and the downtrodden. And
I'm probably working with the Stenza, the technology to get out and kind of.
I actually agree. I agree that was very likely.
And impossible, in all likelihood, got thrown into Stormcage for a hate crime.
Yeah.
In all likelihood, like one that even his little daddy probably couldn't buy him out of.
Yeah.
These are just little thoughts that just went through my head. I was like going, this guy, there are times you don't really need to have a whole story spoon-fed. You just need the basics, and they gave it to you. And honestly, it's not what he was just aided the core story, the thing that was actually important, and that's what he served. If he gave it any more, he would have distracted from what was really important in that episode. He was a plot device to get us into that main story. So
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
I'm going to go back to being me, and I'm going to say that, he's absolutely this villainous being, because I would think that somewhere along the line, I just feel like he's going to come back, but he intimates just with his actions and his ideologies that he's been an evil person, that he's been an evil being this entire time, and everywhere that he goes, he purports all of this absolute horrible thing, horrible events, to the point that he comes all the way here to Earth to get rid of, to stop Rosa Parks. I mean, come on, can you imagine what it really must be like out there? And oh my goodness, this is the type of being that I think would I think that situationally, Rosa, you said, is a good example for where it's the ideology itself that's villainous, or that's antagonistic, or that's negative or polar opposition, right?
Correct.
So see how we're finding a totally different thread for looking at what we can see as an anti-arc, you know?
Yeah, no.
Or as an antagonist.
Even the next episode, the Arachnids in the UK, is the same concept. It's building on the idea of the ideals behind this person that is inherently racist. It kind of goes on that same building block, and it kind of builds on that same theme that they did in Rosa. And it just kind of punctuates the point and moral message that Chibnall's trying to present with these characters, these basically villains, for lack of a better word, in this actual sense, and this villainous concept behind these people that are so morally bankrupt. And I think that is probably one of the most terrifying characters, is the fact that there is no character. Yes, this man represents an ideal, but that's more terrifying than a monster that's coming at you, because an ideal is invisible. It could happen anywhere. It could happen with anybody. So it's not just a monster of the week. It is an ideal which you're fighting, which is incredible. And I think that makes for really terrifying TV, is when you see those ideals going against a person that an alien that is so the epitome of the best of society and the best of humanity. And the Doctor rivals against different things and concepts, but that is the concept of humanity, honestly. The Doctors, that's the embodiment of humanity.
Actually, while we're on Arachnids in the UK, I'm actually going to point the focus on the title characters here for a second, because we should. First off, this is actually the Doctor's 5th on-screen duking it out with Arachnids. There's actually a part of me wanting to say it's the best one, because I got to admire Chibnall for actually doing his homework about the primary reason why we can never have spiders that big. I was actually really impressed that he actually acknowledged that. Honestly, the only time I've ever encountered where anything of unusual size having a hard time breathing because of their girth and their size was Ant-Man and the Wasp. But then it was just nice seeing them tackle it here. But it was nice but this was like the first indication to me that they were trying to go a different route with the focal point of the fear. The idea that these creatures are just doing what nature dictates. And unfortunately, nature's thrown out of whack because of their body chemistry. And these things, they're lashing out, but they're also freaking out at the same time. And there's not much more we can do about them other than just try to give them the most peaceful death that we can give them.
And that's the great part about this. Okay. Yeah. I think the greatest part of that is the fact that it's realistic, and that kind of punctuates the scariness of the concept that's behind it.
Well, the funny thing is, a lot of things that they did in that episode were actually, in a way, it was kind of a companion episode to a classic of the Third Doctor era, The Green Death, which also involved pretty much the same concept of a corporation, spewing toxic sludge, which ends up mutating the indigenous insect population. Well, in this case, arachnid population. So there was a kind of refreshing old school feel to it like that. And that's another thing I got to get to the whole season. There was a lot of episodes which had a beautiful old school feel to
Throwback.
it. Yeah. And, for as cartoony as Jack Robertson was, he was kind of in keeping with a lot of the over-the-top panto villains of the classic series, particularly a lot of the villains that we did see in the Barry Letts era and even some of the Second Doctor era, like Tobias Vaughn in Invasion, is just because, the over-the-top industrialist character. I think the thing that kind of destroys him as an antagonist character, and normally, I know pot calling the kettle black, on my channel, I have no problem taking dibs at Comrade Little Hands, but or Trumpty Dumpty, as I like to call him, because he sat on a wall, so. But anyway, but the fact that they kind of hammered that home, there's a time and a place, and they really didn't need to do that with this character.
I agree.
Yeah,
and again, that kind of goes back to some of the stuff with Chibnall that the writing is kind of wonky, but we'll go into that in another episode.
Yeah, that's another episode.
Yeah, that's a whole other spiel that we're gonna have to go on. But the next villain that we got to go into, or the next antagonist, because let's be real, this is not a villain. The cute, cuddly little
the Pating.
Yeah.
I have absolutely no ill will towards the Pating for one very simple. Well, it actually kind of goes back again to arachnids in the UK. I like the fact that they're not begrudging creatures that are only doing it for the sake of because it's their natural habit.
Yeah.
I mean, and honestly, if there's any problem I had with the Pating, is just that I don't think it had nothing to do with the Pating itself, but more about, are we still on? Was more about the fact that we didn't really get to see the full extent of the damage that the Pating was doing.
Correct.
And that's not really the Pating's fault. Honestly, that's really more of a production or more of a writing level, is that we never really got a chance to see what the full extent what that little bugger was doing.
Which would have been so fascinating to see the Pating actually do like some crazy spin-off episode, and I think that would be such a great like character to bring back, because I can't even call that a villain, because it's just so cute and adorable, and it's like I want to grab it by its cheeks and go like that if it wouldn't kill me and bite me.
I mean, well, in a way, that's kind of like the Monsters Incorporated fear of kids. You know, it's like touch it and you die. Yeah. I looked at the thing, the first time I saw it, I was like going, that is pretty much what I'd expect in Doctor Who. I mean, because not every monster has to be horrifying or threatening. It just has to be a threat either by its very nature or by its motivation. In this case, they played the nature card. And
the adipose were like that.
Oh yeah,
I mean, it wasn't that they.
I mean, we love them. We love them because they had a great personality, and it was great that they were not.
Cute and cuddly.
Oh, are you kidding me? I've got a plush.
So do I.
I've got the plushie. I love the adipose. They're adorable.
They're little cute fatty boys.
To hell with Pokemon. I want to catch adipose. You know, they're freaking adorable. Oh,
and adipose weren't inherently negative or evil or bad. They were created as part of this whole process, you know, this experimentation to recreate the species. And you know, the Pating in and of itself is not evil either. It didn't mean to be. It's doing what's natural, and that's what the doctor says. It's doing what's natural and normal for its own survival. So you can't eat it.
In the end, it was just it was a chess match more than it was like, you know, this thing's evil. Mm-hmm. We got to stop it. It's just, if we don't stop this thing, it's going to kill us. And that was a nice, and I like the fact that they were. And we're going to probably get into it a little bit later, particularly when you get to an episode, which I know when we get to it, I'll bring it up. But I like the fact that was a consistent angle that Chibnall wanted to go through this season, was the fact that even when they're threatening your life, they're not doing it for any kind of actual malicious reason other than it's in their nature, or it's just something that's just something that's part of the way they live. I was like,
it's an interesting way to approach the characters and an interesting way to write. Mm-hmm. And it's different than what we've been experiencing the last few seasons. Mm-hmm. So I could see where a lot of people would draw criticism to that, but I actually personally enjoyed it myself as well. And I like how the characters they aren't just this fit the mold type of characters. They're kind of out of the box, kind of out of the ordinary characters, which is fun. Mm-hmm. And it's refreshing to see that. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. And then
it actually rolls me back to a very interesting episode with the Waters of Mars. Again, it's a horrible, and you're going to be like, how did you juxtapose that? It's this horrific, guys, like freaky, you know,
the flood
episode. But in and of itself, it's just this damn virus trying to survive. Yeah. You know, it's doing what it's supposed to do naturally to try and exist. Mm. And what are you going to do about that? You need to get out of its way now because you're in its space. So, you kind of have to get away from it. So it's just, if you're thinking, it's along those lines again. You know, I can see some good similarities in the RTD plot points. You know what I mean? In terms of how we work with our opposition. So
definitely. Nisha, you want to lead us into the next episode?
Sure. Hang on one second. Let's see what comes next. I'm trying to remember all of them, honestly.
Demons of Punjab.
I'm sorry. Yeah, the Demons of Punjab.
Yes.
Yep.
Yep.
So again, with the Demons of Punjab, we're looking at multiple villains or multiple possible, plausible villains, and which one is the real villain? Huh? It's kind of a bait and switch type of episode.
Mm-hmm.
So we automatically go, just like the Doctor does, and the Doctor apologizes and says mea culpa for doing this, because this automatic rhetoric is to go and say that the alien type being that looks evil is evil. And in the long run, is that what the case was?
Yeah.
No, this was an extremely empathetic, caring, and giving species, the last of their kind, who are trying to support, human beings as they leave the world. They're not just humans, right? Because they travel around the universe and the galaxies doing this. So it just so happens that we got them at this time because we're in an environment where there's so much death, needless, shameless death. So you tell me in the long run, who is the villain in this episode?
That's what I was talking about. That's what we were talking about at the beginning of the episode. It's not about that. I think it's more about the ideals in this episode. Yeah. It's the ideal that the antagonist.
That's exactly.
Well, there's people that are inherently just not the most pleasant people, and they have a mixed ideal, which they grab onto the ideal that's the antagonist, and that's what propels this character forward. But it's the ideal that's technically the villain in this. And that's where it's interesting. How do you label that as a villain? You can't. It's an idea of hatred. And that's an underlying theme of this season, is that underlying hatred and hatred for the difference. Even the Doctor is a victim of this. Yeah. Even the Doctor is a victim of this in this episode, which makes it that much more compelling that everybody is susceptible to this. Even the most, our hero of the show basically falls victim to this.
Well, amazing. Well, actually, in the past, we have seen the Doctor immediately jump to a conclusion when it comes to when he looks at it. Like a good example, and it kind of reminded me of this, was Town Called Mercy. Yes. When the Doctor goes into Collar Jex's ship and sees his entire history, and he wants to condemn him. Immediately he wants to say, "You have done horrible things that I cannot forgive." And immediately wants to jump to the idea that they're not in any kind of way capable of redemption. The one thing I gotta say I loved is that, and most people, and because this series was so totally different from everything else, it's so easy to separate this season from it. But it was nice to see that the Doctor may have actually learned something from that encounter, because once the Doctor found out the true story behind the Jarians, and the fact that she immediately said, "Oh, crap in a hat, I better listen and make sure I've got my details straight, because I could have probably done something just as bad as what's going on and what's coming towards us." And in a way, it could have made her just as bad as the people that were coming to kill. Yeah.
And that's the impressive part, is that this season you see the growth of the Doctor from episode to episode, and it's all because of the villains or antagonists that it happens. And each of these antagonists, the Doctor actually learns from each of them and actually progresses with that, which is fascinating, because in previous seasons, we kind of get an influence of the antagonist, but never really you see the pattern of the Doctor actually learning from the antagonist in every single episode. This season has been different because it actually has done that, which I think is fascinating. And I think that's a great idea to go with for future seasons, because we need something like that. It's a change up.
Yeah. And it was nice that even with this red herring, that wasn't the thing that was really gaining our focus, was the fact that history was literally trotting towards us, armed to the teeth, and the fact that the one true villain turned out to be the closest person to them, and it turned out to be Manish in the end. And it's just sad and I guess that was the most potent part of the episode for me, because I myself kind of am going through the idea of people I grew up with have pretty much becoming monsters because they drink the Kool-Aid and they end up turning against people they love. And I immediately felt for Prem, because I myself kind of feel like I'm going through that right now with what's going on in the world as it is. So to find out that, and I immediately felt it. I love the last scene where Prem just cries just as my little brother. And that's the biggest mind screw of all, is to find out that this person that you saw as a child is now bringing over a horde of people with guns to kill everyone you love.
Yeah.
Just because of a freaking line in the sand.
Literally just a line in the sand.
Yeah.
It's all because of trying to divide up something that doesn't.
So the evil in this case is the herd mentality.
Yep.
And the isms that come with the herd mentality. And I think that in this particular case, I want you to go back, just a final point on this episode. Well, there's so many points to make in this episode. I really want to do an episode so specifically on the points that, Joe and I have come up with as we've reflected on it. But we need to go back to the very beginning when Yaz is speaking with her grandmother. Yaz has spent her entire life with one particular belief. Her grandmother has never told her differently, but she's always believed that watch belonged to the grandfather that she knew.
Yeah.
And that was just a philosophy, something that she'd romanticized in her own mind and in her heart, and no one said any differently. And think about the fact that grandmother, the Nani, till that point in her life and a ripe old age, has still held that so sacredly near and dear to her heart. That is a point of sadness and contention and pain and sorrow for me, that when she left for Sheffield and she had a new life and a new husband and a new family, isn't it so sad that Nanny couldn't actually tell that story truthfully? Or did she just want to hold on to the story? So I've always wanted to get the rest of this. What happened when she went back? Why didn't she tell it? What was so difficult for her to not tell that truth? It was a big truth to tell. You know what I'm saying?
I definitely think so. I think there's a lot to explore in this episode, like you said. I think it's something that we should maybe do like a one-off and have a discussion with Joe Into the West and himself, and just go really in depth on this episode, because I think we could literally do an hour just on the episode, on the concepts of this one episode and the relationships in this one episode.
Yeah.
So
relationships and the differences. The differences, or the supposed differences, or the imposed differences that then led to racism and socialisms and culturalism that then led to mass genocide, because that is what happened.
I think it goes back to like you said, it's the isms. It's the isms that are the villain in this, and that's where you see the concepts of hatred showing up again in this particular episode of season 11, and you kind of see that's the underlying themes throughout this season, and kind of building on each other to be punctuated in these next episodes. This last
highly punctuated. And when you look at this particular theme that we were just highlighting, you have to realize that's a similar philosophy.
Yeah.
And in all of the episodes, in all of the seasons, it has never been different from the moment that Eccleston came back.
Correct. I agree 100%. So now let's take a deep breath and enjoy the next episode that is Kerplam. Let's go away from the deep concepts of that we've done in the first 6 episodes, and Kerblam.
And let's just go into a madcap parody of Amazon / murder mystery or Murder Mystery.
I
Yeah.
don't see the parallel of Amazon. Everybody keeps saying that.
Well,
It is. I do
it's
not see the parallel.
it's a big
I
it's a big
still don't
online
believe.
retail company that is pretty much all you need. Honestly, the real thing here is the fear of automation, because right now
Correct.
we are in a bit of even though we don't call it that, we are in kind of a new industrial revolution right now.
Yeah.
The idea that technology is taking over a lot of things. I mean, as I jokingly always allude to, I used to work at Blockbuster all the time. And nowadays, of course, everyone's being all cool and nostalgic in history, saying like, "Oh man, streaming's nothing, man. We were great when we had home video rental." And I'm like,
why didn't you go there?
Then why didn't you go there then? Otherwise, it would have been still alive. Because that is the ultimate fear, is that technology will take over, because
it does.
It does. it does.
Real.
But it also points out the necessity of moving forward in order to be able to evolve with the times. That way you stay afloat. That's why people like Judy were able to stay on top of things, was because she kept up.
Yeah.
I'm worried that...
But it's the reason that Charlie becomes like he does.
I was actually going to...
What you just said is exactly. Go ahead.
I was actually going to ask if we should avoid saying the big bad, because... But then again, this is a retrospect, so people probably have seen the episode. So yeah, we could talk about Charlie.
And I love that concept, because it's your garden variety person that literally is seeing things as a conspiracy theory, and they're going out there to finally do action, to do something. Is that really a villain if he hadn't done what he had set to do? If the concept of what he wanted to do, would that have been villainous if he wouldn't have gone into a mass genocide? If he would have just had the concept of getting back at this company. If you break it down and you break down the concept of saying, oh, this guy just literally wants to get revenge on this company for getting everything automated and making everybody lose their jobs. And all he's trying to do is make a statement out of it. Not doing anything else, not putting in perspective what we saw in this episode. If he's just doing that, would he be a villain?
Yeah.
If he shut down a company that served 4 trillion people and still employed people.
Well, that employs only 10% of people.
Only 10%.
Only 10% of people to do jobs which, for the longest time, have been done by humans. I mean, now they have friggin' creepy robots with headlights.
Yeah.
Doing the delivery guy job, a job which has been a time-honored job for.
So from the very beginning, I asked if he was an activist, and I mean, you're talking about activism. Activism is very different. So activists don't always do things the right way. So
correct.
I don't agree that what he's doing. I believe that if he had, he's a standalone, mind melded activist who's regardless of whether he had shut down everything versus done what he did, which was so much more horrific.
Correct.
What his intention was, it was still going to be wrong. It doesn't matter. A wrong is a wrong, and it's what it is. So.
But what I'm trying to define is that moment where he crossed the line. Where does it go from being a person that's an activist to a villain? And that's why I love this episode, is because it shows that progression of this character that didn't want to start off as a villain. He was trying to protect people. He was trying to do this with good intentions. Yet he got drawn into it because he saw that there is no other way around it other than this violent act, which is atrocious and horrible.
Yeah.
And I love how they portrayed that in this episode, that they show that there is a very fine line. And once you cross over, you're gone. You're far past. And that's the scary part about activism, is that you have to be aware of where that line is. And I love that this episode kind of hits that point.
Yeah, the line is what are you willing, and who are you willing to sacrifice?
Yeah, and the unfortunate thing is that the one thing that he sacrificed is the one thing he wasn't expecting to sacrifice, and that was a nice little angle right there. Is that and it actually goes to the whole thing of people who want to demonize something or someone they haven't seen, haven't met, and then they actually get to know them, they actually get to see them, and then they come to the realization it's a lot more complicated.
Yeah.
Actually, a good example was the movie American Hustle.
Yes.
Where everyone was trying to vilify Jeremy Renner's character, but when Christian Bale starts working with him, getting to know him, he comes to the realization he's doing this mainly because he has to. Yeah. But in the end, his intentions are all noble. But unfortunately, he is still breaking the law. Yeah, which means that he has to hurt him. Yeah, one way or another.
That's what I'm talking about. That's interesting concept to grab in Doctor Who. And this will be my final point, honestly. It's the fact that you're crossing that line, and where is that line? And again, it goes back to the characters and antagonists that Chibnall is putting in to this season, and the writers of Doctor Who, because it's not just Chibnall, it's other writers that are bringing in these concepts into the show. And most of these writers they're not sci-fi writers. They write for social messages, and this is a very important social message. Where is the line when you're an activist to a terrorist? And that is fascinating.
Yep.
I don't think that this is a new philosophy for Doctor Who. I think this is, again, another very, very common theme, looking at how far are we willing to sacrifice. Doesn't the Day of the Doctor, the War Doctor, doesn't every doctor get to a point at which they have to question their own willingness to quell their...
I mean, actually, legendarily, the Fourth Doctor had probably one of the greatest moment of conflicts in the history of Doctor Who, when he had when he had the opportunity to basically wipe out the Daleks before they even started. Yeah. But then he had that one moment of conflict where he realized what makes him any different by doing this.
Yeah. And that's the thing, though, is that's the Doctor. This is a human character doing that, which is very interesting because we have seen that before in Doctor Who, but it hasn't been as profound as this episode because of the previous episodes in this season. It kind of gives you, it makes you attach that concept behind this episode, which is fascinating. And I think that's what makes it that much more poignant rather than other episodes that do the same thing in a very good manner, that it does do the same concept. But this season, because the way it's done, it kind of punctuates that moment where he's doing that. I think that's fascinating.
So I think we got into So let's talk about another kind of thing which became something of a plague in the time that it took place in, going into the Witchfinders, which I believe is the next one.
Yes.
Fanaticism is definitely at the core of what that entire episode was about. Yes, of course, big mud monsters, the Morag, were the creature, which I will say, the way that episode was filmed, the way it was shot, and the makeup work they did, they were freaky. I mean, that I gotta say. I mean, once again, if you know your Doctor Who, you know mud monsters is not unusual concept.
Throw mud.
Yeah, well, here's the thing: the fact that they were selling the fact that they were actually entirely comprised of mud, but also the fact that they, in a way, like the Gelth, inhabited the dead to reanimate the corpses. All that stuff is actually very classic Who. I remember really enjoying the Witchfinders because atmospherically, again, reminded me a lot of the Philip Hinchcliffe era of the show. But the fact that all that really carried forward into the theme, because this is why I'm sad I didn't get a chance to take part in the review of the episode, because I was waiting for this episode to come because of Jodie Whittaker being the Doctor, because I wanted to see that one episode where the Doctor actually faces the problem of being a woman in the past, and the fact that, yes, the Morag are definitely the big bad of it. I forget the villainess's name. I think Rebecca? Becca?
The name escapes me.
Yeah, but yeah, she is definitely a main antagonist. But in the end, it's all about fanaticism being the big bad.
It's Becca. By the way, it's Becca. It's Becca.
Okay, I nailed it. Okay, good. Yeah, the fact that fanaticism is really the end-all, be-all. And unfortunately, at that time, we were scared of our own shadow because that was a pioneering age. That was an age of people trekking out into the unknown ironically, for the sake of religious freedom and just for the sake of trying to start up something new. But they cling to so much to allow their archaic values, that because they're in unfamiliar territory, because it is a hostile territory that they're in during this particular time period. I'm sorry, I mean, I know this is in somewhere like Yorkshire or something like that, but this was still a time period where people reached it, or spread themselves out. So
Lancashire.
Lancashire. That's
it's right. Lancashire, guys.
Lancashire. But
basically,
you're like the times of hardcore fanaticism where people were freaking out over new concepts, and anyone who even dared to show any kind of eagerness to pursue that kind of thing were branded as a heretic or a madman, or of course worse, a denizen of Satan.
Correct. Yeah. And Nisha, what were you saying? I'm sorry.
No, I'm not sure that I'm not sure it's fanaticism. So it's definitely fear and fear mongering in order to relegate power and to maintain a state of power. In this particular case, while I'm sure that Becca was truly enamored in her belief that Satan existed and that their witches existed, in this particular case, it was solely based on her seeking out, or her wanting to survive. Right? It was all about self-survival. Everything that she did, and the doctor says it to her without a question, very flat. So you were willing to sacrifice the lives of 27 so that you could find a way to survive?
Yeah.
Because you didn't know what was going on. So you fabricated this entire scenario and literally tortured 27 people because you didn't want to die.
Yep.
Because you knew you had something evil inside of you, but you didn't know what to do with it. So your decision was to do something as horrific as this. There we go back to an individual person. Again, there we go. What are you willing to sacrifice? Becca is like Charlie. In her brain, she has to survive up and above everything because, well, she's supposed to survive, right? Because she's better than everyone. So there's elitism.
The thing that motivates her to want to survive is the fact that she has something in her mind, satanic and unknown, brewing within her. In her mind, it is. She thinks it is full blown Satan inside herself, right? Because of the fanatic philosophies, and pumped into her brain by people like friggin' King James and the whole concept of saying like, oh, Satan's everywhere around us. I mean, the fact that he was brewing so much paranoia all around, like hinting, it was like the Red Menace of the century.
That's exactly it. That is exactly what I'm saying.
Again,
it's brewing paranoia through fear-mongering.
Exactly. It goes back to hatred. That's the main antagonist of this episode. And again, it goes into what this season is all about, is hatred. What it does to people, how it kind of changes up through the centuries, because this whole season is from like one century to all the way to the other side of the spectrum. So it literally spans the whole lifespan of humanity. And it shows that we have this moments of hatred all throughout our history, and even in our future we have this hatred. So don't identify it.
And I agree that hatred rears its ugly head, because this is the word that we want to hold on to, because this is the word that we know to hold on to. But it's for fear of waxing too poetic here, it's more than fear. It's more than hatred. It's the thing that the hatred stems from. Yes. And that is always still going to be the fear of the unknown, the fear of being wrong, the fear of not belonging, the fear of not having enough. And it's all of those things that then stem and grow those hatredisms, those isms that we keep talking about. So I think that's definitely what the season's been about. It's about isms.
And that's the perfect segue. I want you to continue on with that concept on it takes you away. Can you continue on with that with our little toad friend that does those same concepts?
Go ahead, John.
Well, talking about you're talking about the Solitrax.
Yes.
See, honestly, that was an episode that I was iffy on, or I wasn't iffy. I was just more kind of. I didn't know what to make of it at first, but then again, I love Doctor Who when it's aloof like that. The more I watched it, actually, the more sadder I got in the right ways.
Yeah,
is specifically the idea that the Doctor is actually being confronted by pretty much the only kind of living entity that could any way she could relate with. The idea of someone who is eternal, who is everlasting, and who pretty much will always be condemned to be alone, which is unfortunately exactly what the Doctor is.
So would you say that it's kind of a self-identification of the Doctor? It's kind of a mirror image of what the Doctor could be if it wasn't for the companions that kind of anchor down the Doctor into reality.
I think it's, actually, more than anything else, it's actually more about the fact that the Doctor needs the companions so bad that a lot of times the Doctor could potentially damage things as a result of it. In fact, this is actually kind of when you think about it, it's kind of a carryover from the season 9 finale, when we find out that the Doctor is so hell-bent to keep a hold to keep a hold of Clara that he doesn't care that he's actually damaging the fabric.
He doesn't care.
So
that's a concept throughout.
Yeah. And
one of my absolute favorite episodes from in 50-something years. Hellbent, I've watched it so many times.
Hellbent
and Heaven Sent. My God.
Actually one of my favorite seasons. And because that 2-part finale was spectacular.
Yes, it was.
And probably also one of my departures.
And I loved this whole concept of this kind of Stephen King-ish alternate reality where you have to cross over this kind of bridge gap and all that stuff, and then cross over and meet this entity that is basically God in this dimension. And it's very fascinating that this is where you kind of can't say that this is a villain, because all it's trying to do is just find friends.
Yeah.
I mean, that's incredible that you can make this whole episode centered around just somebody trying to find a friend.
Yeah.
Somebody's just trying to reach out and give a hug. And I love the fact that image, the final image, is just that. It's just a frog. And that's what we see as the image of the entity. And I think that is fascinating, because that's kind of the epitome of everything. This creature, all this creature wants to be, or this entity wants to be, is just this lovable person. This lovable thing.
Yeah.
That they could take and hold and be friends with. And that's why the entity grabs onto that image that the Doctor admired, that little brooch with the frog on it, and grabbed that concept and made it the identity of the entity. And that's just fascinating.
Because Grace loved frogs. So I think that the moral conundrum has always been that the Doctor, and it's been said many, many times, which John can attest to, that without the bravado and the morality and the integrity of the companion, questioning that of the Doctor would have already destroyed all of time and space. There is no doubt that would have happened, and it's been said so many times. And look at the War Doctor again in the moment. Look at how many times the story is relevant, no matter how many times it's retold, that it's the Doctor. The Doctor, in and of itself, the Doctor is at the core of either the benevolence or the destruction. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And in all of time and space, this poor little being has wanted to do nothing but belong, to be cared for.
But unfortunately,
to be part of something.
It can't.
Yes.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And
can you just imagine that sadness? Oh my God.
Well, the thing is, this is one thing I've been kind of sad about with the new series, that they really haven't done it yet. And I'm hoping with the resolution with Yaz, Graham, and Ryan that we get this. We have not actually had truly a companion who's left because they're settled, that they found their place in the universe and that they're ready. we haven't really had too much of that, not since the classic series. I think the last companion, it's sad, but the last companion who did that was Mel. And she's an awful companion who is severely underwritten. Her departure makes no sense, but she's saying like, I'm good. And I'm like, where does this come from?
Yeah, I think Graham is going to be that character, and I think that we're going to see that.
Yeah,
but Graham is going to be that, right?
Other episode.
Yeah, but it would be nice. But it's nice to see that we have a companion. But the frog does essentially represent the heartbreak that the Doctor unfortunately always has to deal with the idea that she knows that sooner or later the companions, whether it be by death or just by natural departure, is going to have to leave her, and she's always going to have to wander alone.
Outlive all of these companions.
Exactly.
Outlive or outsee the companion and live on a different life. Now, we've gone over Tim Shaw already in the first episode, so I think that we got it covered with the 10th episode.
Yeah, well, then we just had to go into the actual series finale.
Yes,
which of course is a Dalek.
Yeah.
So, and what more can we say about a Dalek that we hasn't been saying? I'd say the best thing we can really talk about with this particular Dalek is how he compares to every other Dalek we've ever encountered, because to Chibnall's credit, he did come up with a fascinating concept for this Dalek, which I have actually never thought about before, the idea of a recon Dalek, and the idea that he's physically, amped up in order to engage in hostile territory, potentially primitive hostile territory. And I was like, that's a really clever, but that was an interesting concept. And because of all these new things that he was introducing to us, was able to show us the Dalek doing things which we actually have never seen before.
Yes.
Particularly the puppet master angle, which I will say actually, and I'm using that term accurately, because it was very much like out of Heinlein, practically, or even out of Invasion of the Body Snatchers. But I will say all the scenes where Lynn was being controlled by it, and even just the imagery of her with the thing on her,
that was
pretty freaky.
It was honestly, it was one of those things that if I'm not used to horror and stuff like that, I would have been like, wow, that's pretty dark. That's dark. That's a dark concept. That's crazy to do that for the New Year's special. But yeah, I agree that the Daleks, the way that they approached it in this episode was fascinating, and I love that they finally gave the Daleks a new light that I was just growing stale of them, honestly, with the last few seasons.
Daleks have always been they've been a very commonplace villain, and they've had their highs, they've had their lows. The problem is it's the whole concept of familiarity breeds contempt, and for a time we were getting to that point where they were kind of more of a plot device, as opposed, which to Moffat's credit, he never ever made any of the episodes where he featured them, at least particularly during the Capaldi era. He never. I think the last time he actually made an attempt to try to make the Daleks imposing or threatening was Into the Dalek,
which was fascinating.
Well, that one was interesting on a different level. That was fascinating on a different level. But the last time he featured the Daleks was The Magician's Apprentice, but they were just there by requirement. They had to be there.
Yeah.
Because you don't do an episode about Davros and not have to do an episode with the Daleks. So, I mean, that's something we just have to forgive. But the thing is, but I gotta say, to the credit of any episode, is that if your intention is to focus on the Daleks as an intimidating factor, they tend to deliver on that front. It's just, if you notice, a lot of the episodes involving Daleks actually don't strive to make them intimidating.
Yep.
That's the hitch. And this one, thank God, actually endeavors to do that, particularly when they gave it the Mad Max treatment and watch that thing lay out an entire platoon or a garrison of soldiers in like a minute flat. And I gotta say, and it was a cool image. I mean, obviously an image we're never going to see again, because you can tell it's a one-off creation, but I'll say it was a pretty effective creation. It looked wicked.
I agree. Nisha, what do you think of that?
Oh, I am absolutely fascinated with this concept. It's been intimated that the Dalek hierarchy does exist, and not just intimated, but it has actually been explored multiple times. Whether it's been with 10 or with 11, we're looking at the Daleks at different seasons of their own existence. And so within those seasons of their existences, we're also looking at hierarchical power. And I feel like this particular, recon character, being from the origins of the Daleks, makes so much sense to me about how they would populate entire planets and galaxies and overtake beings. Because in this, they're also showing you how easily they're willing to inhabit the dirty body of a human, because we're garbage to them, right?
Oh,
so
yeah. Well,
basically, well, yeah, I mean, they say that's what we are, the filthy garbage. I was just, I was looking back again at Scarrow. I was looking back at some of again, I did the entire marathon, and I thought a lot about how contemptuous, the Dalek conference was of the human body and the human existence. That they look down upon themselves for using human bodies in order to be able to get the teeniest bit of genetic code that made sense for the beauty that is the Dalek. So
yeah, because
it flashed across my mind as I watched this recon. Dalek recreate itself. And the fact that it knew to do that already, it wasn't something that, as we were led to believe throughout the seasons of Doctor Who, that it learned to do. Obviously, it had always been inbred that they had the ability to regenerate, and this is how they were going to do it, and they were going to do it in this horrible, genocidal way, because they were fully ready. The recon Dalek was fully ready to bastardize the entire planet, in order to be able to populate. So I was fascinated, and I felt like it wasn't the new Dalek. I felt like it was the Dalek that we could have and should have, and were waiting to have from the very inception of the Dalek clan, of the Dalek. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I agree 100%.
So I was very much felt like this was a very strong and impressive character build. And I think it would be flawed if they didn't find a way to work with this character build, because I feel the concept of going back to the inception of the communal Dalek population is very, very essential and critical to going back and understanding the conflict with Gallifrey and the conflict in Earth at the time that we have, the annihilation existing. So I thought this was a beautiful segue, or a beautiful path to start on, in order for us to be able to start to look at it from that way. And think about this. The Doctor it took a while to realize that this was a recon.
Yeah.
Oh my God, this is a recon Dalek. This is the Doctor. How old is the Doctor?
Yeah.
And yet it takes the Doctor this much time.
Around this time. Well, I mean,
yeah.
Yeah.
That I loved.
Yeah, so
I love the concept.
The notion that the Doctor's facing off against a variation of Dalek, which probably, for the longest time to her, probably was considered obsolete.
Yeah.
But and to her credit, this is a very compelling reason why she hasn't encountered one in a while, because this one was literally buried in time.
Yep.
For hundreds of years. She probably encountered
that's exactly
ages ago.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. It's beautiful.
Yeah,
it's
because
beautiful.
nothing about it, bear in mind.
I
the Doctor
love
has actually faced off against Daleks of that age, not since her first incarnation.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
with
that's it.
Critique. So that's interesting, and I think that's where we could kind of build on these episodes that we're going to be doing in between the gap of the seasons. We're going to be building off of the villains, and we'll be able to discuss further all these concepts of these classic Doctor Who villains, and kind of pick and choose which ones we want to go into. And we could do one of these episodes every quarter and highlight one of the main archetype monsters of Doctor Who, and really do an in-depth concept of them, and really go real deep into what the characters do. And I'm so happy that this conversation turned what it turned into. I love how we kind of morphed the idea of the antagonist and the villains, and kind of changed that concept of that in this season. And I'm glad you guys were both able to share the concepts that you both had with it and insights.
I mean, I mean, do we have like the Monster of the Week thing, like the traditional Doctor fights a big bad every week thing? In a way we do, but the thing is about, it seems like, and I gotta give Chibnall some credit and all of his entourage, it seemed like they wanted to focus more on the monsters, the villains, the antagonists, as more of something to serve the central core of the story. And it all lent to what made season 11 feel much more unique compared to everything we've seen before. It's clear to me Chibnall is much more interested in Doctor Who exploring ideas as opposed to just being, even though the adventure is there, but it seems like he wants to explore the Doctor Who as a crusader of truth and idea, of life, of information, of knowledge. It seems like that's more what he wants the show to be about. More is about the pursuit of truth.
Yeah,
more than anything else.
And Nisha, how about your final thoughts on this season?
I feel well, I mean, I've been here every week, so you guys know how I feel about running themes.
Well, particularly the
antagonist.
let me rephrase
I because it was quite easy in this episode, as we've discussed, to go ahead and to reflect back on seasons infinitely from the past and show that while this is a new, refreshing take on how we tell the story of the antagonist, the enemy, the frenemy, or the villain, it's also a refreshing way for us to look at that same category of frenemy, enemy, antagonist as something beyond a physical being. And the thing is that's actually not a new idea. It has been there time immemorial, literally from the first episode of Doctor Who. It's just that as a fan or as a sabiant of Doctor Who, if you go back, you can find that. You can find that's been a common theme. So what I have always believed about the Doctor is that the Doctor for every single season, truly, even if it's the same Doctor in the body of the Doctor becomes a different being. Because the Doctor has learned and grown and is morphing and amorphizing and transforming. And in this way, every time you have a new Doctor and a new regeneration, all of the morality, the integrity, the emotions, the belief systems, the learned behaviors, culturalisms and socialisms all come to play and they all get cooked again in this Doctor. And I believe that Jodie is embodying a new philosophy of Doctor, and Jodie has to do that because that is what the Doctor has done with every single regeneration. And if you ask this Doctor to be another Doctor, the exact same as another one, then you don't understand the concept of Doctor Who whatsoever. The only time where we were allowed to fall prey to that is between the first and the second regeneration because it was so darn new to everyone. But once it had happened, it now became a subtext and subcontent in the growth and the potentiality of the Doctor. So I'm sorry, but you have to understand that this Doctor is doing what the Doctor is supposed to do.
Yep, no, 100%.
Growing and learning.
Antagonists are a main concept of that, and I love the insight that you gave on that because that is an amazing concept, and I definitely agree that it's one of those things that we definitely need to go into even further with certain episodes, I think, and we'll really be able to go in depth and really do kind of hit on those marks and actually go further on certain episodes like Demons of the Punjab and Punjab,
thank you.
Yeah, sorry. And others as well that kind of hit those notes that we want to go further and kind of devolve it even further and develop it into what we want to hit on and see it even further than it already is. But thank you guys for joining us this episode. We're running way long this episode. But that's what we get for trying to stick all the antagonists in one episode.
Well, you plan the episodes. You had to pick the two most knowledgeable people you know on this particular topic. So
of course, why wouldn't I?
Well, fair enough. I mean, you ain't gonna get a meaty episode unless you got people with meaty brains.
That's right.
Not pudding brain.
But thank you, John. You can check out anything of John's content at Narcotic Casserole, and you can see that all through manbitesfilm.com.
Yeah.
The link is on there on his YouTube channel and everything. You could go through that website.
Yep.
And, of course, Nisha with Diversely Geek and Joe Into the West, which wasn't able to join us this week, but hopefully for next week she'll be on as well. And everything you could go
That's
on.
Joe at Life Into the West.
I'm sorry. And
it's okay.
And you can check out all their content on Diversely Geek pretty much anywhere. Diverselygeek.org is the website, but YouTube, podcasts as well, which they are now on pretty much the main podcast sites that you could find. And of course, you could check out Man Bites Media through manbitesfilm.com or any of the podcast websites and YouTube shows. So thank you guys for joining us, and thank you guys for being on the show. And we'll see you guys next week for another episode of Doctor Who in Review.